The arrangement, the rain drummed steadily against the windows of Blackwood Towers as Jonathan Reed stared at the contract before him. His fingers, calloused from years of playing guitar in dive bars, traced the edges of the thick paper. 28 years old, with dreams larger than his bank account and talent that had yet to find its audience, he never imagined his life would lead him to this moment. "Do you need more time to consider?" Harold Blackwood asked, his voice carrying the practiced patience of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. The owner of Blackwood Hotels, with properties spanning 3 continents, rarely had to wait for anything. "No," Jonathan replied quietly. "I understand the terms." The terms were simple yet life-altering. Marry Olivia Blackwood, Harold's only daughter, stay married for at least 3 years, and receive $5 million upon completion. Additionally, Jonathan would immediately receive funding for his music studio, something he had been trying to establish for years. "My daughter needs stability," Harold continued, pouring himself another finger of whiskey from a crystal decanter. "The tabloids have been merciless about her, indiscretions, marriage to someone respectable but outside our social circle would refresh her image while providing a necessary cooling-off period." Jonathan nodded. Though respectable seemed a generous description of his current status, what he possessed was a spotless record, no scandals, and most importantly, no connections to the elite circles that might recognize this marriage for the business transaction it was. "And Olivia agrees to this?" he asked, pen hovering over the signature line. Harold's laugh was short and hollow. "Olivia understands her responsibilities to our family name. Besides, she's the one who selected you from the candidates I presented." Jonathan felt a chill despite the office's warmth. He had met Olivia Blackwood exactly twice, the first time at a charity event where his band had been hired to perform, and she had approached him afterward with unusual interest. The second time had been a private dinner arranged by Harold, where Olivia had studied him with calculating eyes while barely speaking 10 words. "I should be flattered, I suppose," Jonathan said, attempting humor that fell flat in the oppressive room. "You should be practical," Harold corrected. "This arrangement benefits everyone. Olivia gets her father off her back, you get your studio and financial security, and I get my company's future secured without constant PR nightmares." Jonathan finally signed, his signature a stark contrast to the elegant letterhead of Blackwood Enterprises. He was selling something intangible, something he had always believed would come naturally, a marriage based on love. But love hadn't paid his mounting debts or helped his mother with her medical bills. Love hadn't opened doors to record producers who dismissed his work without listening to a single note. "Welcome to the family, Mr. Reed," Harold said, taking the contract and pressing a button on his desk. His assistant appeared silently, collecting the document. "The engagement will be announced next week. My team will contact you regarding wardrobe, etiquette training, and public appearances." As Jonathan rode the elevator down 87 floors to the rain-soaked streets below, he wondered if he'd made a deal with the devil. His phone vibrated with a text message from Olivia herself. "Dinner tomorrow, 8 p.m. Wear something that doesn't look like you bought it at a thrift store. This arrangement works only if you're convincing." He pocketed his phone and pulled his worn jacket tighter against the rain. The proposal had come after months of rejection letters from every music producer in the city. His band had broken up, his apartment was one missed payment from eviction, and his mother's medical bills were piling higher each month. $5 million in a fully equipped studio meant security, opportunity, and the chance to finally help those he loved. It was just 3 years of his life, he reasoned. 3 years playing a part, and then freedom with the means to pursue his real dreams. How difficult could it be to pretend affection for a beautiful woman who happened to be as cold as her father's ambition? As he navigated the crowded subway, Jonathan had no way of knowing that his decision would set in motion events that would crack the foundation of the Blackwood empire, reveal unexpected allies, and ultimately force him to question the true price of dreams. Shattered glass. The Blackwood Hotel Grand Ballroom glittered like a diamond cave, with crystal chandeliers reflecting light across the faces of New York's elite. 6 weeks after signing the contract, Jonathan stood at the edge of the crowd, tugging at his custom-tailored suit that felt more like armor than clothing. The engagement party was in full swing, a carefully orchestrated spectacle designed to announce the unexpected union between Olivia Blackwood and the promising young musician Jonathan Reed. "Stop fidgeting," Olivia hissed through a perfect smile as she approached, champagne flute in hand. "You look like you're about to bolt." Jonathan straightened, adopting the relaxed posture his image consultant had drilled into him over the past month. "Just admiring your world," he replied quietly. "It's quite the performance." Olivia was stunning in a silver gown that caught the light with every movement. Her dark hair swept into an elegant updo that emphasized her sharp features. She looked exactly like what she was, the heiress to a billion-dollar empire, polished and pristine. "We'll get used to it. This is just the beginning." She clinked her glass against his before turning to greet an approaching couple. "Senator, how wonderful you could make it." The evening proceeded as a blur of introductions and small talk. Jonathan relied heavily on the coaching he'd received, discussing his promising collaboration with an up-and-coming producer. arranged by Harold and his vision for innovative sound experiences, a script written by the Blackwood PR team. No one needed to know that he still played occasional gigs at bars, or that he'd spent the previous night helping his mother with her physical therapy exercises in her small Queens apartment. I must say, Olivia has surprised us all, a woman in her 50s confided to Jonathan after Olivia had stepped away. We were certain she'd end up with someone from her usual circle, perhaps Preston Vaughan or Thomas Blackwood, though I suppose cousins would be a bit old-fashioned, even for this crowd. Thomas? Jonathan asked, the name vaguely familiar from the extensive Blackwood family tree he'd been made to memorize. Harold's nephew, the family golden boy, though he prefers to stay out of the spotlight. There he is, by the bar. Jonathan followed her gesture to a man about his own age, dressed impeccably but somehow standing apart from the calculated networking happening around him. Unlike the practiced smiles and measured laughter of the other guests, Thomas Blackwood's expressions seemed genuine as he conversed with an older gentleman. The woman continued, oblivious to Jonathan's observation. Everyone thought they'd make the perfect match to Maze with his environmental foundation, and Olivia with her, well, her family name, but it seems she's found something more interesting in you. Before Jonathan could respond, Harold Blackwood's voice filled the room, calling for attention. The crowd parted as Jonathan made his way to join Olivia and her father at the center of the ballroom. Tonight, we celebrate not just an engagement, but a new chapter for the Blackwood family, Harold announced, his arm around Olivia's shoulders. Jonathan Reed represents fresh vision and untapped potential qualities we value highly at Blackwood Enterprises. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Jonathan caught fragments. Musician, where did she find him? Harold must be desperate. Before Olivia stepped forward, taking the spotlight with practiced ease. Many of you are wondering why I've chosen someone outside our usual circles, she said, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never been denied anything. Let me explain. She turned to Jonathan, reaching for his hand. For a moment, he thought he glimpsed something vulnerable in her eyes, something almost human beneath the polished veneer. Then it vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. I needed someone manageable, she announced, her voice carrying across the stunned room. Someone grateful enough for the Blackwood name that he wouldn't interfere with how I choose to live my life. Her grip on his hand tightened painfully. Let's be honest, Jonathan is decorative, useful for appearances, but hardly someone I'd select if Daddy hadn't insisted I settle down. The silence that followed was absolute. Jonathan felt every eye in the room upon him, a mixture of pity and morbid fascination. The humiliation burned through him like acid, dissolving the careful facade he'd maintained for weeks. Olivia, Harold warned quietly, but she ignored him, years of resentment spilling out. Did you really think I'd give up my freedom for some struggling musician with nothing to offer but a pretty face? This arrangement suits us both. You get your respectability, and I get to continue living exactly as I please, with a husband too indebted to object. Jonathan gently extracted his hand from hers. I think that's enough, he said quietly. Oh, but I'm just getting started, Olivia continued, alcohol and bitterness fueling her cruelty. Should I tell them about the contract? The price tag we put on your dignity? The glass shattered before anyone realized what was happening. Thomas Blackwood stood beside them, champagne spilled at his feet, his expression thunderous. That's quite enough, Olivia, he said, his voice low but carrying the weight of absolute authority. You've made your point. Stay out of this. Cousin, she snapped. This doesn't concern you. When you publicly humiliate a guest in our home, it becomes my concern. Thomas turned to Jonathan, something like respect in his eyes. Mr. Reed, I believe we should step outside for a moment. Harold was already in damage control mode, laughing too loudly as he addressed the shocked guests. My daughter's artistic temperament at work. Please, enjoy the music while our happy couple takes a moment. Thomas led Jonathan through French doors onto a terrace overlooking the city lights. The cool night air was a blessed relief after the stifling tension inside. I apologize for my cousin, Thomas said, removing his jacket and handing it to Jonathan, who realized he was shaking. Olivia has always struggled with the constraints of her position. Is that what you call public evisceration? Jonathan asked, surprising himself with a hollow laugh. Just struggling with constraints. Thomas's smile was unexpected and genuine. I call it unforgivable, actually, and it tells me everything I need to know about this arrangement. He studied Jonathan carefully. Whatever my uncle offered you, it isn't worth this. For a moment, Jonathan considered maintaining the charade, but what was the point now? $5 million and a music studio says otherwise. Ah, Thomas nodded. My uncle's signature solution. Throwing money at problems. He looked back toward the ballroom. What will you do now? Jonathan considered the question as city lights blurred below them. The contract, his mother's medical bills, his dreams of music production all hanging in the balance against his shredded dignity. I'm not entirely sure, he admitted, but I know I won't be going back in there to play the grateful charity case. Thomas extended his hand. Then perhaps we should leave together. I find I've suddenly lost my taste for champagne and shallow conversation. As they descended in the service elevator to avoid the press gathered at the main entrance, Jonathan realized he'd unwittingly found an ally in the last place he expected, the very heart of the Blackwood family itself. Hidden talents. 3 months after the disastrous engagement party, Jonathan sat in a cramped recording studio in Brooklyn, headphones pressed to his ears as he adjusted levels on the mixing board. The space was nothing like the state-of-the-art facility Harold Blackwood had promised, but it was his rented with the modest settlement he'd received after walking away from the contract. "That's the one," he said to Dina Wilson, the jazz vocalist whose album he was producing. "Let's keep that take." Dina gave him a thumbs up through the glass, her smile genuine. In the aftermath of what the tabloids had dubbed the Blackwood betrayal, Jonathan had expected to fade into obscurity, possibly leaving New York altogether. Instead, he'd found himself receiving calls from indie artists who had heard about his public humiliation and, more importantly, how he had handled it. "Dignity under fire," one music blog had written. Reed walked away from millions to maintain his integrity. The article had been shared thousands of times, eventually catching the attention of several established producers who remembered Jonathan from his persistent attempts to get his music heard. The door to the control room opened, and Jonathan's assistant, Riley, poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but Thomas Blackwood is here again." Jonathan checked his watch. "We're almost done here. Tell him I'll be out in 15 minutes. After the engagement party, Thomas had unexpectedly reached out. What had begun as an awkward coffee meeting to apologize for his family's behavior had evolved into a genuine friendship. Thomas, it turned out, was as much an outsider to the Blackwood empire as Jonathan, despite his bloodline. His Environmental Conservation Foundation operated entirely independently from the family business, funded by his inheritance from his late parents. When Jonathan finished the session and emerged into the small reception area, Thomas was reviewing the framed album covers on the wall indie projects Jonathan had produced over the past few months. "The Wilson album sounds incredible," Thomas said, turning with a smile. "You've found your element. Thanks for the recommendation." Dina's voice is pure magic. Jonathan grabbed his jacket. Lunch at the usual place. They walked 3 blocks to a small Vietnamese restaurant that had become their regular meeting spot, far from the upscale establishments where Blackwoods typically dined. "I heard from Olivia yesterday," Thomas said once they'd ordered. "She's in Zurich with her latest ... companion." Jonathan shrugged. "I hope she's happy." He meant it. The anger had faded quickly, replaced by a strange gratitude. If Olivia hadn't publicly humiliated him, he might still be trapped in the arrangement, living a hollow life for the promise of future wealth. "She's Olivia," Thomas replied with a wry smile. "Happy isn't exactly in her emotional repertoire, but Uncle Harold is beside himself. The scandal has affected quarterly projections, apparently." "Is that why you've been meeting with investment bankers?" Jonathan asked, noticing Thomas's surprise. "Riley saw you at Mercer's last week." Thomas's expression turned serious. "I was going to tell you today. Actually, I'm considering a significant career change." He hesitated. "I want to establish a record label focused on indie artists with environmental and social justice themes, artists like the ones you've been working with." Jonathan set down his chopsticks. "That's unexpected, is it?" Thomas asked. "I've watched you build something authentic these past months. Meanwhile, I've been running a foundation that, while meaningful, still operates within the constraints of my family's expectations." His eyes were alive with purpose. "I want to create something that combines my passion for environmental issues with your talent for discovering and nurturing musicians. And you want me involved." "As a full partner," Thomas confirmed. "I have the capital and business connections. You have the musical expertise and artist relationships. Together we could build something revolutionary." The waiter arrived with their food, giving Jonathan a moment to process the proposal. His mind raced with possibilities, a label that prioritized artistic integrity and social impact over commercial success, yet had the financial backing to compete in the industry. "What about your family?" Jonathan finally asked. "Won't they see this as some kind of betrayal?" Thomas laughed. "My family sees any independent thought as betrayal, but I'm 32 years old with my own inheritance. It's time I stopped worrying about the Blackwood approval rating." For the next hour, they outlined their vision, scribbling notes on napkins and building on each other's ideas with growing excitement. Their plans extended beyond a traditional label to include education programs, community recording spaces, and environmental benefit concerts. "Earth Sound Records," Jonathan suggested, "connecting music and environmental consciousness." Thomas's eyes lit up. "Perfect." As they walked back toward the studio, Jonathan's phone buzzed with an email notification. He glanced at it, then stopped abruptly on the sidewalk. "What is it?" Thomas asked, concern crossing his features. "It's from Vortex Media Group," Jonathan said, reading the email again to make sure he wasn't misunderstanding. "They want to meet about acquiring my current projects and offering me a senior producer position." Thomas's expression shifted subtly. "That's wonderful, a major opportunity." "It's what I would have dreamed of 6 months ago," Jonathan agreed, sensing the sudden tension between them. "But now, you should take the meeting," Thomas said firmly. "This could be everything you've worked for." Jonathan studied his friend's face. recognizing the careful mask he'd seen Thomas wear at family functions, supportive, but hiding his true feelings. "I'll take the meeting," Jonathan agreed, "but I think they're about to hear a counteroffer they weren't expecting." Thomas's genuine smile returned. "What do you mean?" "I mean that Vortex approaching me now gives us leverage," Jonathan explained, the plan forming as he spoke. "They clearly see value in what I've built. Imagine what they'd think of a new label backed by Blackwood resources but operating with complete artistic independence." Understanding dawned on Thomas's face. "You want to use their interest to attract investors for Earthsound?" "Exactly, and to demonstrate that our model has commercial viability." Jonathan felt a surge of confidence that had been building over months of small successes. 6 months ago, I was willing to sell myself to secure a future in music. Now I know my value comes from staying true to the art and artists I believe in. As they resumed walking, Thomas's phone rang. He checked the display and frowned. "It's Uncle Harold. Third time today." "You should answer it," Jonathan suggested. "Sounds important." Thomas sighed and accepted the call, listening intently as his expression grew increasingly serious. When he hung up, he looked troubled. "Problems at Blackwood Hotels. Their Asia-Pacific expansion is collapsing, and there are rumors of financial irregularities." He shook his head. "Harold wants an emergency family meeting tonight." "Go," Jonathan said. "Family is family, even when complicated." Thomas nodded reluctantly. "I'll call you tomorrow about the Vortex strategy." He hesitated, then added, "Whatever's happening with the hotel chain, it won't affect our plans. My assets are entirely separate." As they parted ways, Jonathan watched his friend walk toward the subway station, shoulders squared with a determination he recognized. Both of them had found strength in unexpected places, Jonathan through losing everything and rebuilding on his own terms. Thomas through finally stepping out of his family's shadow to pursue his own vision. Back at the studio, Jonathan returned to the mixing board, Dina's soulful voice filling his headphones as he considered how differently things had turned out than he'd expected. The path to his dreams hadn't come through contracts or compromises, but through finding his authentic voice, both in music and in life. What he couldn't know was how quickly the Blackwood empire was unraveling, or how soon the consequences would ripple through all their carefully laid plans. Empire of Cards. Olivia Blackwood stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of her father's office, watching rain streak down the glass like tears. The view of Manhattan's skyline, once a symbol of the Blackwood dominance, now seemed to mock her. Behind her, Harold paced the length of the room, his face ashen as the family lawyer outlined their rapidly deteriorating situation. In summary, Bernard Schmidt concluded, adjusting his glasses, the irregularities in the Asia-Pacific accounts have triggered investigations in 3 countries. The Singapore properties are already frozen, and we expect similar actions in Malaysia and Indonesia within days. "This is absurd," Harold snapped, slamming his hand on the desk. "I personally reviewed those transactions." "Which is precisely the problem," Thomas said quietly from his position by the door. He had maintained a careful distance throughout the emergency family meeting, both physically and emotionally. "Your signature is on documents that authorize what appears to be extensive money laundering." Olivia turned from the window. "Can't we just make this go away? Pay whoever needs paying." The lawyer shook his head. "This isn't a minor indiscretion that can be buried with a donation or a settlement. We're talking about potential criminal charges." 6 months had passed since her disastrous engagement party. Olivia had spent most of that time abroad, moving between luxury hotels and exclusive resorts, deliberately disconnecting from family business matters. She had returned only yesterday, summoned by her father's increasingly desperate messages. "What about the North American properties?" she asked, her mind calculating. "Those aren't affected, right?" "Not directly," Bernard confirmed, "but the stock has dropped 30% since the news broke. Lenders are getting nervous. We're facing a serious liquidity crisis." Harold collapsed into his chair, suddenly looking every day of his 63 years. "I built this company from 12 hotels to a global empire. I won't watch it disintegrate over some accounting misunderstandings." Thomas stepped forward, placing a file on the desk. "These aren't misunderstandings, Uncle Harold. These are deliberate financial manipulations dating back at least 5 years. His voice was level but firm. "The board is meeting tomorrow to discuss your temporary removal as CEO." "You're behind this," Harold accused, his face flushing. "You've always resented that your father's shares came to me after his death." "I'm trying to salvage what can be saved," Thomas countered, "including keeping you out of prison." Olivia moved to her father's side, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. "This family has overcome worse. We'll weather this storm too." "Not without significant changes," Thomas insisted. "The Blackwood name might survive, but the company as it exists now is finished." After the lawyer departed with promises of preparing defensive strategies, Olivia found herself alone with Thomas in the hallway outside her father's office. Harold had retreated to his private washroom, the sound of retching barely audible through the heavy door. "You seem remarkably calm about our family's collapse," she observed, studying her cousin with newfound attention. Thomas had changed subtly over the past months, more confident, less concerned with appeasing the family hierarchy. The family isn't collapsing, Olivia, just the corrupt business practices that have sustained it. He met her gaze directly. You could help with the transition, you know. You're smarter than you let people see. She laughed bitterly. Don't pretend you respect me now. I've seen how you look at me like I'm some spoiled child throwing tantrums. I've never doubted your intelligence, Thomas replied. Just your priorities. And yours are so noble. Running off to start a record label with my ex-fiancé. At his surprised expression, she smiled thinly. Yes, I know about Earthsound Records. Congratulations on the launch next month. Thomas considered her for a moment. Jonathan has nothing to do with this situation. No. Olivia raised an eyebrow. The Blackwood heir and the musician who publicly humiliated me, becoming business partners right as my father's company faces ruin. Quite a coincidence. Jonathan didn't humiliate you, Olivia. You did that all on your own. Thomas's voice remained calm. And he's rebuilt his life without any desire for revenge or compensation. You might learn something from him. The elevator chimed, interrupting their tense exchange. Jonathan stepped out, stopping abruptly when he saw them. Sorry, he said, clearly uncomfortable. Thomas asked me to bring the investor agreements for review. I can come back later. No need, Olivia replied, adopting the cool society smile she had perfected over years of navigating uncomfortable situations. I was just leaving. Best of luck with your musical endeavors. She stepped into the elevator, then turned to face them as the doors began to close. Oh, and Thomas, don't worry about the board meeting tomorrow. I'll handle it. The melody of second chances 2 years later. The Grand Plaza Ballroom hummed with the elegant energy of New York's most exclusive charity gala. Earthsound Records was hosting its annual Harmony for Habitat benefit, combining environmental fundraising with performances by the label's award-winning artists. The event had become one of the most coveted invitations of the social season, notable for both its environmental impact and its authentic musical showcases. Jonathan adjusted his bow tie before stepping onto the small stage to introduce the next performer. As co-founder and artistic director of Earthsound, he had finally found the perfect balance between commercial success and artistic integrity. The label had exceeded all expectations, launching successful careers while maintaining its commitment to environmental causes. Ladies and gentlemen, he addressed the crowd. Please welcome Dina Wilson, performing selections from her Grammy-nominated album Restoration. As Dina took the stage, Jonathan made his way through the crowd toward Thomas, who was deep in conversation with potential donors. Their partnership had flourished, combining Thomas's business acumen with Jonathan's musical instincts to create something neither could have achieved alone. Excellent turnout, Jonathan commented as he joined the group. The Rainforest Initiative is fully funded. Thomas beamed with genuine pride. We're adding a second project in Indonesia now. He excused himself from the donors and guided Jonathan toward a quieter corner. There's someone here you should know about, he said in a lower voice. Olivia arrived about 10 minutes ago. Jonathan's surprise must have shown on his face. I didn't realize she was on the guest list. She wasn't, Thomas confirmed, but as the new CEO of Blackwood Conservation Group, she apparently felt entitled to an invitation. Following the financial scandal, Blackwood Hotels had indeed undergone the dramatic transformation Thomas had predicted. Harold had avoided criminal charges through a combination of legal maneuvering and his advancing heart condition, but the hotel empire had been largely dismantled. From its remains, Olivia had surprisingly salvaged the company's nascent ecotourism division, rebuilding it into a conservation-focused enterprise that was gradually restoring the family name. Is she here to cause problems? Jonathan asked, scanning the room. Thomas shook his head. I don't think so. She's been different since taking over BCG. More focused, less volatile. Before Jonathan could respond, he felt a light touch on his arm. Turning, he found himself face to face with Olivia Blackwood for the first time since that fateful engagement party. She was still striking, but the hard edge that had defined her features had softened somewhat. Hello, Jonathan, she said simply. Beautiful event. He nodded cautiously. Thank you. Congratulations on the Sumatra Sanctuary project. The preservation work is impressive. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. You've been following our work. Environmental conservation is our focus too, he reminded her, gesturing around the ballroom where sustainable materials and practices were evident in every detail. Your reforestation methodology has been particularly noteworthy. Thomas excused himself to address an issue with the sound system, leaving Jonathan alone with the woman who had once so publicly humiliated him. I owe you an apology, Olivia said after an uncomfortable silence. What I did at our engagement party was unforgivable. Jonathan studied her, looking for the calculation or manipulation he had come to expect. Instead, he found what appeared to be genuine regret. That was a lifetime ago, he said finally. We've all moved forward, some more gracefully than others, she acknowledged. I spent a year being angry at everyone else before I finally recognized my own responsibility. She glanced around the elegant event. You've built something meaningful here. Both of you have. So have you, Jonathan replied, surprising himself with his sincerity. The Blackwood Conservation Group is doing important work. Olivia smiled slightly. It turns out there's something satisfying about creating rather than just consuming. She hesitated. I have a proposal. Actually, a collaboration between BCG and Earthsound for an awareness campaign about endangered musical traditions in regions affected by deforestation. Jonathan found himself intrigued despite his reservations. That's actually a fascinating concept. My team has put together some preliminary ideas. Perhaps we could discuss it sometime. She reached into her clutch and produced a business card. No contracts or family arrangements this time. Just a straightforward professional proposal. As he accepted the card, Jonathan realized how completely their roles had reversed. Now he was the established success, while Olivia was the one seeking to rebuild her reputation through genuine achievement rather than family connections. I'd be open to hearing more, he said carefully. Thomas and I both would. The evening continued with performances and fundraising appeals. Later, as Jonathan took the stage with Thomas for closing remarks, he surveyed the room filled with artists, environmentalists, and supporters who had helped turn their vision into reality. When we founded Earthsound Records, Thomas told the audience, we believed that music could be both commercially viable and socially responsible, that art and activism could strengthen rather than compromise each other. What we didn't anticipate, Jonathan added, was how many others shared that belief and were waiting for the opportunity to prove it. As applause filled the room, Jonathan caught sight of Olivia at the back, watching thoughtfully. Their eyes met briefly. An unspoken acknowledgement passing between them, recognition that sometimes the greatest harm can lead to unexpected growth, and that pride's heaviest price often becomes the catalyst for its own cure. The final performance of the night featured a collaboration between Earthsound artists, a piece about renewal and second chances that filled the ballroom with harmonies of hope and possibility. As Jonathan listened, he reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought him here. From a desperate contract signed in a rain-streaked office to this moment of genuine achievement, Thomas joined him at the edge of the stage, their shared vision now a thriving reality. Not bad for a struggling musician and a reluctant heir, he commented quietly. Not bad at all, Jonathan agreed, watching as Dina's powerful voice brought the audience to their feet. Though I think we're just getting started. Behind them, the skyline of New York glittered with promise, while inside, the music spoke of transformed lives and second chances, a melody of resilience more valuable than any fortune or family name could provide.